My son-in-law carried a cardboard box past me like it was nothing, and inside it was my late wife's face. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up, because you need to understand who I was before you understand what almost happened to me. For 35 years, I ran Kingston High School. Not worked at. Ran. Every kid who walked through those doors on Broadway knew my name before they knew their locker combination. I broke up fights in the cafeteria. I sat with kids in my office who had nowhere else to sit. And I retired 10 years ago with a pension of $6,000 a month and a plaque that said Larry Parker, Principal, 1988 to 2016, that's still bolted to a wall somewhere in that building. You spend 3 decades saving other people's kids, you start to think you've got the whole family thing figured out. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get comfortable. This story is going to take you somewhere. Hit that like button and drop a comment below letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. My wife Martha passed away 4 years ago. A stroke. Just gone before I could say the things I'd meant to say for 40 years. She used to make Sunday gravy in a cast iron skillet so heavy I couldn't lift it one-handed. And our boy Liam, my son, the chef, used to stand on a step stool next to her, stirring it while she taught him things she never taught his sister. I still keep her portrait over the mantel. Oil painting, done by some art student at the community college back in '94. She's got that half smile in it, like she's about to say something smart. I live alone in that house on Hasbrook Avenue in Kingston, the same house we bought in 1979. 2 blocks from the diner where I still get coffee 3 mornings a week. The waitress there, Donna, knows my order before I sit down. That's the kind of life I had. Small. Known. Mine. Then, this past spring, my heart decided to have an opinion about all that. I was in the driveway, pulling weeds, of all the boring, unheroic things to be doing when your body tries to kill you, and I felt like somebody parked a truck on my chest. I don't remember much after that except the ambulance ride and a paramedic named Diane. No, wait. Scratch that. I'm not going to remember every name from that blur. What I remember is waking up in a hospital bed at Vassar Brothers, with wires taped to me and a doctor telling me I was lucky. Lucky. That's a word people use when they don't know what else to say. My daughter Becky got there before anyone. She's 39, married to a guy named Killian Donovan, and she cried at my bedside like I'd already died. Killian stood behind her with his hand on her shoulder, real solemn, real steady. The picture of a good husband holding his wife together. I remember thinking, thank God she married someone solid. My son Liam is out in Napa Valley, California, 3,000 miles away, in the middle of opening his own restaurant. A real one. The kind that gets written up, the kind he'd worked 15 years in other people's kitchens to earn the right to open. He called Becky in a full panic the second he heard. I wasn't in the room for that call, but Becky told me about it later, and I've replayed it in my head enough times since that I feel like I was. Liam, I don't know what to do. Dad's in the hospital and Killian took the phone right out of her hand. Gentle about it. Liam, listen to me, man. Breathe. I need to get on a flight. I need to. No, you don't. Killian's voice calm as still water. Family comes first, but you are being family right now. You understand me? You've got a restaurant opening in 6 weeks that you've bled for. Becky and I are 10 minutes from the hospital. We'll bring your dad to our place. We'll take care of him. You focus on what you built. That's what your dad would want. That's what taking care of family looks like. Liam cried on that phone call. Grateful, relieved. A weight lifted right off him by a man he'd always liked well enough but never really known. Not the way you know your own blood. And Becky looked at her husband like he'd just walked on water. I didn't hear any warning bells. Why would I? Killian had been decent to me for 11 years. Sent me a Father's Day card every year. Always signed it Love, Killian and Becky. Like he wanted to make sure I knew he meant it too. Sold insurance up in Poughkeepsie. Drove a leased Ford Explorer he was a little too proud of. But who am I to judge a man his choice of car? So when they told me I was moving into their place in New Paltz to recover, I said sure. Made sense. My house has stairs. Their place is a ranch. And I trust my daughter. Or I did. The first week wasn't bad. Becky fussed over me, made me soup, drove me to my cardiology follow-up at the medical building off Route 299. Killian was around less. Works crazy this time of year, he said, which, fine. Insurance guys probably do get busy. I didn't think twice about it. Then one evening, maybe day 9, Killian sat down across from me at their kitchen table, with 2 mugs of decaf and an expression I mistook for concern. Larry, listen, I've been thinking. The main house, it's a lot right now. Becky's got the kids' schedules, the dog barks at everything, and you need quiet. You need rest. Real rest. I'm fine in the guest room, I said. You think you're fine, but your heart doesn't know the difference between a bad dream and a bad day, Larry. Stress is stress. He leaned in. We fixed up the garage. Real nice, insulated it last year when Becky wanted a craft room. It's quiet out there. Private. No kids running through, no dog scratching at the door at 6 a.m. It'll be like your own little apartment while you heal up. I almost laughed. A garage. At my age. But then I thought about it, and honestly, it didn't sound crazy. Privacy sounded good. Quiet sounded good. And Becky chimed in from the doorway, dish towel in hand, smiling. Dad, it's really nice out there, I promise. And it'll give us time to freshen up your room in here. New paint, maybe get you a better mattress for when you visit. When you visit. Like I was already a guest in my own family's life instead of the center of it. I should have caught that. I didn't. Sure, I said. Whatever's easiest. The garage really was fine at first. A cot, a space heater, a little TV on a folding table. Killian even hung a calendar on the wall, which struck me as a strange, thoughtful little touch. I told myself, this is temporary. This is recovery. This is family taking care of family. Some nights, lying out there listening to the house settle, I'd hear voices through the thin wall that separated the garage from the mudroom. Killian's voice, low and steady, going on and on. I couldn't make out words most nights. Just tone. Urgent. Persuading. One night I did catch something. Becky's voice cracking. But what if they take the house, Killian? What if they freeze everything and we can't even... That's why we need the paperwork, he said. That's the only way to protect him. You think the state cares about your father? They'll drain every dollar he's got the second he's declared incompetent. We get ahead of it now. We protect him before it's a crisis. I remember lying there in the dark thinking, protect him from what? I wasn't incompetent. I balanced my own checkbook. I still did the crossword in pen. But I was tired, and my chest still ached some nights. And I told myself Killian was just being careful. The way careful people are sometimes annoying, but not dangerous. A few days later, Killian came out to the garage with a woman carrying a leather folder. He told me she was a mobile notary, doing some standard estate protection paperwork so the state couldn't freeze my assets over the new hospital bills. I was groggy, heavy on beta blockers, dealing with dizzy spells, and I trusted my daughter's husband. I initialed where he pointed and signed the bottom. I didn't read the fine print. Why would I? It was just to protect the family, wasn't it? Weeks went by. The garage stopped feeling temporary and started feeling permanent, the way anything does once you stop asking when it ends. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Killian walked into the garage carrying a cardboard box. What's that? I asked, not even looking up from my crossword. Oh, just some stuff from the house. Thought you might want it out here with you. He set the box down, and I saw a corner of gold picture frame poking out through the flaps. My stomach did something strange before my brain even caught up. Killian. I set my pen down slow. Is that Martha's portrait? He pulled it out. There she was. That half smile, like she was about to say something smart. Why is it off the mantel? Killian's face did something I'd never seen it do before. A flicker, a crack in the calm. Well, the real estate, he stopped himself so fast it was almost violent. His smile snapped back into place like a rubber band. Sorry. I just thought you'd love having her close to you out here. Real estate. I said nothing. I picked up my pen. I went back to 17, across like nothing had happened. But something in me, the same something that used to know, just by the way a kid's shoulders sat, that he was lying about where he'd been all night, that something sat up straight and did not go back to sleep. They're selling my house, and nobody had told me a single word about it. After the portrait, after that one cracked syllable, the real estate, hanging in the air like a struck bell. I didn't say a word to anybody, not to Becky, not to Killian. I finished my crossword that day like nothing happened, and that night I lay on my cot staring at the garage ceiling doing something I hadn't done in years. Planning. 35 years running a high school teaches you one thing above everything else. You don't corner a kid who's lying until you know exactly what he's lying about. You corner him too early. He digs in. He hides the evidence. He gets a story straight before you ever get the truth. I wasn't going to make that mistake with a grown man scheming under my own daughter's roof. I couldn't call Liam. My boy had 6 weeks left before his restaurant opened out in Napa, and if I told him what I suspected, he'd drop everything and fly home on the next plane, and Killian would smell it coming a mile away. I needed somebody who already knew how to move quiet. So I thought of Paul. Paul Hopper was 16 years old when I pulled him out of a stairwell fight at Kingston High, with a busted lip and a look in his eyes like the world had already decided what he was going to become. Foster kid, angry, smart as hell, and nobody had ever told him that. I sat with him 3 lunch periods a week for 2 years, wrote him a college recommendation myself, watched him become a cop, then a detective, and every single Christmas since, a card in my mailbox. Thank you for seeing me. Paul. I didn't have his number, but I still had connections at the school, and Donna at the diner still had half the county's cell number written in a book behind the register, because Donna's been serving coffee to this town since before some of these people could drive. Paul showed up 2 days later, dressed down, carrying a paper bag like an old student just stopping by. Mr. Parker. He said it the way he always did, like I was still standing at the front of that school, not lying on a cot in somebody's garage. Heard about the heart attack. Wanted to check in. Becky was inside with the kids. Killian was at work. We had maybe 20 minutes. Paul, I said, keeping my voice down low, I think my son-in-law is stealing from me. He didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't ask, are you sure, Larry, you've been sick? Maybe you're confused. He just set the paper bag down on the folding table and started unpacking it slow. A tin of cookies, a magazine, a bag of birdseed for absolutely no reason I understood, until he unzipped the bottom of it, and there, nestled down in the seed, was a phone. Burner, he said, untraceable. Keep it charged, keep it hidden, and only call me on it. You understand what I'm about to tell you. I'm listening. Whatever you signed in that hospital, and I'd bet good money it wasn't just billing paperwork, that gives him legal cover. If I come in here right now with a badge and start asking questions, he lawyers up in an hour, hides every dollar he's moved, and we lose him. Paul crouched down so he was eye level with me on that cot, and for a second he wasn't a detective. He was 16 again, looking at me like I was the only adult who'd ever told him the truth. We need proof, a paper trail, and we need it before he knows we're looking. So that's how it started. Not with a bang, with a bag of birdseed and a boy I saved 20 years ago, saving me back. Paul made one more call that week, to Liam out in Napa. I wasn't there for it, but Paul told me after, and I've thought about that phone call more than almost anything else in this whole ordeal. Liam, it's Detective Paul Hopper, your dad's old student. I need you to stay calm and just listen. Is my dad okay? Did something happen? He's alive. He's stable. But Liam, he's living in a garage, and your brother-in-law is liquidating his life. Liam told me later that the floor of his own kitchen tilted under him when he heard that he had to grip the steel prep table just to stay upright, surrounded by 15 cooks who had no idea their boss's whole world had just cracked open. I'm getting on a plane tonight. No. Paul's voice, flat and final. You do that, you tip him off, and every dollar he's stolen disappears into an account we'll never find. I need you to do something harder than getting on a plane. I need you to help me build a case, quietly, from 3,000 miles away. My son, God love him, has spent 15 years learning how to run a kitchen that does 200 covers a night without a single ticket getting lost. Turns out that skill translates real well to forensic accounting. Every night after service, once the line cooks went home and the dish pit went quiet, Liam sat in his empty restaurant with his laptop. On our second call on the burner phone, I'd given him my online banking login. The password was Martha's birthday, something I'd never forgotten. He logged right in and started building something Paul called an ironclad spreadsheet. 6 weeks. That's how long it took him. 6 weeks of my son going home each night not to sleep, but to trace every transaction my $6,000 pension had made since I moved into that garage. What he found wasn't subtle, once you laid it all out in a column. A truck lease payment, $1,200 a month for a Chevy Silverado that was registered to Killian Donovan. 3 different credit card payments, none of them mine. A payment to a real estate attorney's office in downtown Kingston that had nothing to do with my medical care. Not $1, not one single dollar, of my pension had gone toward Dad's expensive medical bills. The phrase Killian used every single time Becky so much as looked at him sideways. Liam sent it all to Paul. Every week, Paul called me on the birdseed phone and gave me an update. keeping his voice low, professional, steady. We're building it, Larry. 6 more weeks, maybe less. Don't do anything. Don't say anything to Killian. Just hold on. Hold on. Easy thing to say. Harder thing to do when you're the one lying on a cot in a cold garage counting the days. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it. And be sure you're subscribed. I want to tell you the next part plainly, because I don't think it needs any dressing up to hurt. There's a shelf in that garage, up high, where Killian had put my heart medication. I never asked why up so high, I just figured that's where the shelf was. One evening I needed my evening pills and I couldn't find the step stool where it usually sat. So I dragged over an old paint can instead, because at 73 years old, apparently, common sense takes a night off. I fell. Not far. Not a dramatic tumble down a staircase. Nothing like that. Just enough to land wrong on my forearm and come up with a bruise the size of a plum, and enough to knock the wind out of an old man who used to think of himself as tough. Killian heard the noise and came running out, and for 1 second, 1 single second, I thought, there he is. There's the concern. Maybe I've got this all wrong. Then he saw the paint can on its side and his face went hard. Larry, what were you thinking? You could have broken a hip. You know how reckless that was. I needed my pills, Killian. I couldn't reach the shelf. So you climb on a paint can. He shook his head, disgusted, like I was a child who'd wandered into traffic. And then, without another word, he picked up the step stool, the one I hadn't been able to find, and carried it out of the garage. He never brought it back. I sat there that night rubbing my bruised arm, and something Paul had said kept turning over in my head. It's control disguised as concern. I hadn't understood what he meant until right then, watching a grown man punish me for reaching for my own medicine by taking away the only tool I had to reach it. I didn't cry. I want that on the record. Larry Parker did not cry over a bruise, but I thought about Martha's portrait sitting in a stranger's box. And I thought about my house on Hasbrook Avenue standing empty while somebody negotiated to sell it out from under me. And something in my chest went cold and still, and patient in a way it had never been before. 6 weeks to the day after Paul first showed up with that bag of birdseed, I was sitting on the edge of my cot eating a cold can of soup. Becky hadn't been out to check on me since morning, when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Not Killian's Silverado. Something else. A rental. I didn't even have time to stand up before the garage door creaked open, and there he was, standing in the frame with the late afternoon light behind him, still in his chef's jacket like he'd come straight from the airport without even stopping to change. Liam. My son took one look at me, the cot, the cold soup, the bruise still yellowing on my arm, the space heater that barely worked, and I watched something break wide open behind his eyes. Dad. His voice cracked clean in half. Dad, what happened to you? I opened my mouth to answer him. That's when I heard footsteps coming fast across the driveway, and Killian's voice, sharp and rising, already reaching for control of a story he didn't know was already over. My son-in-law told me to take the burden off his hands, and 6 weeks later I watched him get handcuffed in a parking lot for it. But let's not skip ahead. You've waited this long. Let me give you the whole thing, the way it happened. Killian came around the side of the garage fast, and I saw it in his face the second he clocked Liam standing in that doorway. A flicker of panic before the mask slammed back down. The same mask I'd watched crack once already over a cardboard box. Well, look who finally decided to show up, Killian said, loud, already performing for an audience that wasn't there yet. The superstar chef. Huh, flying in whenever it's convenient for you. Killian. Liam's voice was low. Dangerous low. The kind of low I remembered from when he was 17 and some kid mouthed off to his sister at a football game. Why is my father living in a garage eating cold soup out of a can? You think this is easy? Killian's arms went wide, the wounded martyr routine in full swing now. Becky had come out onto the porch, arms crossed over herself, watching. You think it's easy taking care of an old man? We are drowning in his doctor bills, his groceries, his medications. We had to uproot our entire lives while you were 3,000 miles away cooking fancy plates for celebrities. If you think you can do a better job, then take him. Go on. See what a burden he really is. Burden. I sat on that cot and felt the word land on me like a slap. 35 years I spent making sure other people's children never felt like a burden in my school. And here was a man I'd shaken hands with at Thanksgiving for 11 straight years, calling me one to my face like it was nothing. Liam didn't yell back. That's the part that still gets me when I think about it. My boy, standing in that garage doorway with 15 years of restaurant pressure behind him, more than capable of matching Killian decibel for decibel, and he just went quiet, cold, still. He looked at Killian the way I used to look at a kid I already knew was lying, and I was just waiting for him to admit it himself. "I'm taking him," Liam said. "And you're right, Killian. I will see exactly how much it costs." That was it. No spreadsheet, no accusation, no mention of Paul or the burner phone, or 6 weeks of records proving every dollar of my pension had gone into Killian's pocket instead of my care. Liam just packed my bag, helped me into the rental, and pulled out of that driveway. I watched Killian in the side mirror as we left. He wasn't smug anymore. He was standing there in the driveway with his mouth still half open, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, he looked scared. Liam took me straight to his hotel that night, got me a real meal, turkey club from a diner on Route 9, my first hot food in longer than I want to admit. And the next morning we drove to a lawyer's office in downtown Kingston and revoked that power of attorney so fast the ink barely had time to dry on the new paperwork. The $6,000 that hit my account the following month stayed exactly where it belonged, in my account. Paul told me later that when Killian's accounts didn't get their usual deposit, he panicked in a way that finally made him sloppy. A man drowning in a Silverado lease and 3 Max credit cards doesn't sit quiet when the money stops. He needs cash, fast, and the only asset left with any real value was my house on Hasbrook Avenue, the house he'd already lined up a buyer for, using the power of attorney he didn't yet know was worthless. He told the title company I was too ill to attend the closing, and that he was authorized to handle it on my behalf. He told Becky, one more time, that this was all just protecting Dad's assets, the same lie he'd been feeding her for months. She believed him. She'd been believing him so long by that point that questioning him would have meant questioning her whole marriage, and some people will do almost anything to avoid that particular reckoning. The closing happened on a gray Tuesday morning at a law office off Wall Street in Kingston, not far, ironically, from the school I ran for 35 years. Killian sat across from the buyers, smiling, shaking hands, one signature away from $600,000 that wasn't his. He walked out to his truck feeling like a rich man. He didn't make it to the driver's door. Paul Hopper was waiting for him in that parking lot with a uniformed officer at his side, and a warrant that had felony financial exploitation of an elderly person, forgery and fraud written on it in language a lot less polite than that. I wasn't there to see it. I didn't need to be. Paul described it to me afterward, and I've replayed it in my mind more times than I'll admit. Killian's face going from confusion to disbelief to something close to real fear. Right there in a parking lot with no wife to perform for, no father-in-law to guilt, no audience left at all. Just handcuffs, and the sound of his own name being read back to him, along with rights he'd never once considered a man like him would need. Becky's part in this doesn't end the way you'd want it to, and I think that's the honest way to tell it. She wasn't arrested the day Killian was, but a few days later Paul brought her in to review the files. She sat in that room for hours, refusing to believe it, defending her husband because admitting the truth meant admitting her entire marriage was a lie. But Paul was patient. He laid out Liam's spreadsheet line by line, showing her exactly where my pension went. By the afternoon, the denial completely drained out of her. She wept, finally realizing she'd been weaponized against her own father. She told them everything. The late-night whispers, the way Killian engineered moving me to the garage. All of it. Prosecutors offered her immunity in exchange for testimony, and she took it, because by then there wasn't a version of loyalty left in her worth protecting. She filed for divorce a month later, lost the house they'd bought together, lost most everything, walked away from 11 years of marriage with a moving truck and a storage unit, and a hard, late lesson about the difference between a man who protects you and a man who uses your fear as a leash. I didn't call her. I wasn't ready, and I don't think she expected me to be. Instead, I wrote her a letter. Took me 3 drafts to get it right. Sitting at my own kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold beside me. Becky, I love you. I forgive you. But I need time, and I need you to respect that. You were scared, and a man who is supposed to love you used that fear against both of us. That doesn't erase what happened, but it does mean I understand more than you think I do. Come see me when you're ready. The door isn't locked. It's just going to stay shut a while longer. Dad. She wrote back 2 weeks later. Just 3 lines. I understand. I'm sorry. I love you too. I keep both letters in the drawer of my nightstand, and some nights I take them out and read them again. Not because I need reminding, but because forgiveness is a thing you have to keep choosing, not something you get to decide once and be done with. Killian took a plea. 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. The judge, reading through the financial records Liam built, 6 weeks of nights spent hunched over a laptop in an empty restaurant kitchen after service, called it one of the more calculated instances of elder financial exploitation this court has seen. And I remember sitting in that courtroom thinking, my son did that. My boy, who I used to think only knew his way around a stove, took this man apart with a spreadsheet. Martha would have been so proud of him. Prouder, maybe, than she ever got to say out loud. The fraudulent sale got overturned in probate court a month after that, and on a cool Saturday morning, Liam and I drove back to Hasbrook Avenue together, back to the house Martha and I bought in 1979, the house I raised 2 kids in. The house a man in a leased truck had tried to steal out from under me, like it was nothing more than a line item on a spreadsheet. Liam flew back for a whole week to help me settle in. He didn't need to be told where anything was in that kitchen. Didn't ask which drawer held the good knives. Didn't ask where Martha kept her spices. He moved through that room like he'd been born in it, which I suppose, in every way that matters, he had. He pulled out her old cast-iron skillet, the same one heavy enough that I could barely lift it one-handed, and made Sunday gravy the way she used to, low and slow, the whole house filling up with a smell I hadn't smelled in 4 years. We hung Martha's portrait back over the mantel that same afternoon. Same nail hole. Same spot it had occupied since 1994. I sat down in my chair, in my house, and ate a meal cooked by my son's hands using my late wife's recipe, in the kitchen where she taught him everything he needed to know, long before either of us understood why it would matter so much. One day, Killian tried to take my house. He tried to take my money. He tried to take whatever dignity a man's got left at 73 years old, lying in a cold garage waiting for someone to notice. But he never touched the one thing that actually mattered. Martha was always here, in these walls, in that skillet, in my son's hands moving around her kitchen like no time had passed at all. She was watching over me the whole time. And when I needed her most, she sent my boy home to bring me back to myself. She always did. She always will. I love her. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.